Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from VitalMX, and thanks for joining us for another Inside Factory Bike look. This week's bike is Eli Tomac's 2022 Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing YZ450F. The mechanic duties on this bike are handled by Josh Ellingson, or everybody calls him Jelly. He's actually been with the Star Racing team for quite a few seasons now, originally paired with Justin Cooper, but this year has been moved to the big boy class, the 450s, with Eli Tomac as he joins the team. So the bike program at the Star Racing team is very interesting. They took over the 450 program officially last year. The team is still funded by primarily and is still technically under the control of Yamaha, but they have basically given the contract to run the operation to Star Racing based on the results and success they've had in the 250 class. So the way I like to term this is still Yamaha factory racing, but run and operated by the Star Racing organization. With that, they've really gutted this bike since they got it and done things their way. So there's a lot of differences in this machine from the old factory bike that we saw 2 years ago to the Star Racing machine. Starting with the suspension, Eli's 450 is by far the most exotic of the Yamahas you will find between the 250 and the 450 tent. He is working directly with KYB, and what we mean by the most probably exotic setup under the tent is pretty much everybody else, whether it's the 250 or the 450 even of Dylan Ferrandis, are on a kit version of KYB's PSF1 and a kit shock, and since then has been collaborated on between Enzo and Star Racing's in-house suspension guy, and kind of as they've updated and basically continued to develop that system. Again, that suspension is a kit setup. It is available to the public, and even on the 450, Ferrandis is running that. However, on Tomac's 450, we do see true KYB Works component. We have a full billet shock body, a larger compression adjuster. It does use an 18mm shock shaft, which the kit versions that are on the other bikes do. Again, are just components that are machined, tighter tolerances, and built from scratch, particularly for this racing service and situation. The official stance of the team is that Eli Tomac is on KYB's Works version of PSF1, the pneumatic spring fork and air fork. However, from what we're aware, he's actually on LSF, which is basically a hybrid fork. That means that this fork uses both air pressure for its spring force and is also still using a coil spring, albeit at a much lesser overall spring rate than what we typically find in a spring fork. We don't have the exact info on this, but a good example would be if a normal spring fork is using maybe a 5.0 rated fork spring, this system might be using something along the lines of a 2.8, a 3.0 in that range, and supplementing the remaining spring force using air. The idea behind this is you basically get the best of both worlds. You get the sensation, the initial character, and the feel of a spring fork, but you get the large amount of ramp up and control available through the pneumatics air fork. From what we're also aware, Eli is running a fairly stiffer shock setting at the moment, as it helps him load the front end and get the bike to turn and handle as he desires. The linkage on the bike, at least the pull rods, appear to be stock. This doesn't surprise us much, even though the old factory Yamaha effort would have had unique clamps and linkages and parts like that. Star Racing tends to work more with the production items on the bike. That also includes the chassis and the swing arm, with which what we believe are completely stock with no extra gusseting that we are aware of. Again, they really like to work with the base package that Yamaha has provided. Star Racing's longtime staff, such as Brad Hoffman and Jeremy Coker, are very involved in this engine program and how this bike has been developed. But unlike the 250 engines, which are built at the team's race shop, the 450 motors are actually assembled at factory Yamaha and shipped to whatever location the riders are at. In Eli's case, whether he's down in Florida testing, he's in Colorado, or he's out here in California, all those engines again are still coming out of Yamaha's facility in Cyprus, which the Star Racing team is able to use as an HQ when they are out here on the West Coast. We do know that there are components in the engine supplied by, of course, Recluse, their clutch partner, Wasner, their piston partner, and then we wouldn't be surprised if there is a slew of what is called OW parts in the engine, which is basically factory Yamaha's keyword or code word for their components that they develop in Japan for their racing operations. The electronics on the bike are unique, as most of your factory 450 efforts work with different software to utilize the maximum capabilities of of what is available from Keihin. The ECUs typically look like production Keihins. They have a little bit more capability. In this case though, Star Racing knows the Vortex system, the yellow ECU, an aftermarket option that we see on many 250 teams and a lot of consumers and consumer level engine guys using. That is what Star Racing is using on this 450. Again, that's what their engine department, their engine guys, their electronics guys all have a ton of experience with, and they've carried that over into the 450. You don't see a lot of data on this machine. The Star Racing team, again, is not usually a data heavy team. We don't see wildly redone harnesses with extra sensors and items like that throughout the bike. They're much more of a straight up field team. They work with the riders, they test through everything, they get all the feedback they need to develop the package that we see here. Eli Tomac's not exactly the tallest guy in the field, but he's definitely not on the short side. With this, Eli has changed the ergonomics of his bike a little bit, running a -5mm down foot peg bracket. Once again, this is an OW Yamaha part, is titanium. And then he's also using a modified foot peg from Raptor Titanium, which is -10mm back from the stock position. This gives him a combination again of 5mm down, 10mm back, just allowing Eli to be a little bit more opened up on the bike as he's riding, be able to basically stretch out his legs maximum and not feel like he's probably so over the top of the bike. As far as we're aware, his subframe height is standard, and the triple clamps on his bike from Necken are solid mounted and we believe to be the same offset as stock. The YZ450 of Eli Tomac uses a full billet Nissan caliper. Well, a lot of people consider the Honda design, and this is something that Eli, of course, ran at Honda and carried with him to Cowie and is now still utilizing at Yamaha. This is a differentiating piston design where your leading edge piston is actually smaller than the exiting edge piston. So the piston where the rotor first enters is a little bit smaller and the one towards the exit is a little bit bigger. We've heard that this creates a little bit better pad wear, a little bit more consistent pressure across the rotor instead of having more pressure initially where the rotor enters and making the pads bind in, catch, and wear unevenly. Some of the other components you see on this bike are braking rotors, Excel rims, kite hubs, Vortex sprockets, EK chains, Pro Taper bars, Pro Taper grips, and arc levers. We did notice a difference between Eli and Dylan's bike. Eli prefers a folding lever design both on his clutch perch side and his brake side, where many of his teammates prefer a solid mounted lever without any folding option. Unlike the 250 program, we don't see an electric water pump added to this bike, and we also don't suspect to really see that with any 450 in the upcoming time. These bikes already make a lot of power, and realistically no team is trying to push a 450 to the edge of its ability. Every one of these teams is going after the same thing, broad, rideable power. Yes, they want more than what's there from stock when these guys really need to seat bounce some big section, they're in deep loamy conditions, they want the extra power, but they want it to be so broad and usable that these guys barely ever have to shift these bikes and that they can really maximize the power to the ground at all times. The exhaust system on this bike is provided by FMF. As we state with almost all these systems, it is different for this race team application, not because the production system isn't good, but FMF has gone the extra mile to produce a system that perfectly matches the race package, engine package of this bike, and the exact needs of the team. Another thing of note we've heard with the Star Racing program taking over the 450s is the weight of the motorcycle. We've heard as high of a weight drop as 15 pounds last year from Dylan Ferrandis, going from the factory bike to Star Racing's bike, and we believe Eli Tomac's bike is probably in a very similar situation. The team goes as far as running aluminum fasteners in any place on the bike that they can get away with it. You have to run titanium usually when there's a lot of stress on the bolt, whether it's a vital engine case part, linkage, but for plastic bolts and engine side cover bolts that don't have stress on them, we see a lot of aluminum hardware on this bike as well. The Yamaha 450 again is one of the heaviest bikes in the production field, but the Star Racing team has always been very committed to getting their bikes light, and apparently it's been a big part of what they feel like has been getting this 450 competitive, is to basically get that weight down where these guys can really toss it around over the whole length of the moto. This has been our inside look at Star Racing Yamaha's 450 for Eli Tomac. If you have any questions, anything else you're curious about, maybe some information you want us to dig up and ask these guys, throw it in the comments section below. We'd be more than happy to try to answer that for you. And if you like this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, check us out. Make sure you also check our website at vitalmx.com. Hit up the Pit Bits feature on race weekends. That's where we kind of go through all the updates that the teams make round to round, go around the paddock, look for all the cool gear, the new parts, the new exhausts, all those kind of goodies is in there. And again, thanks for watching.